Hello, I present to you Chapter 26, Echoes of Darkness. Wei Long stood over the bodies of Lei Feng and Gao Ren, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The blood on his sword glistened in the fading light of the day, the forest eerily silent. The weight of his actions pressed on him, but so did something else, something far more sinister. The orb, still pulsing with its dark energy, whispered to him, its presence now almost inseparable from his own thoughts. For a moment, he stared down at the corpses, his hand trembling on the hilt of his sword. He had won, but at what cost? Lei Feng and Gao Ren had been traitors. Yes, but they had been part of his team, people he had once trusted. He had taken their lives with a frightening ease, and it chilled him to the core. The orb's whispers grew louder. More will betray you, none are worthy. Wei Long clenched his teeth, struggling to push the dark thoughts from his mind. He couldn't let the orb control him, no matter how powerful it made him feel. He had to stay focused, had to keep his mind clear. There were still battles to be fought and enemies to face. But even as he tried to calm himself, the darkness inside him seemed to spread, creeping through his veins like a poison. He could feel the pull of the orb, its desire for more blood, more power. It wanted him to give in completely, to let it take over. But Wei Long wasn't ready to surrender his soul, not yet. Back at the camp, Lin Mei and the others had successfully fended off the ambush. The group was battered but alive, though the atmosphere was grim. Lin Mei looked around, noticing Wei Long's absence. Her heart sank. She had seen him break away from the group in the chaos of the fight, and now he was nowhere to be found. He went after them, she realized, her eyes narrowing. He went after Lei Feng and Gao Ren. The others shared uneasy glances. They had all sensed the tension between Wei Long and the two men, but no one had expected it to come to this. Lin Mei grabbed her weapons and motioned for the others to follow. We need to find him. Now. As Lin Mei led the group through the forest, tracking Wei Long's path, her mind raced with possibilities. She had always known Wei Long to be strong, but something had changed in him recently. His power had grown exponentially, but so had his unpredictability. The darkness she had sensed in him was growing, and it terrified her. After what felt like hours, they came upon the clearing. The sight that greeted them was nothing short of horrifying. Lei Feng and Gao Ren lay dead at Wei Long's feet, their bodies twisted and broken. Wei Long stood over them, his back to the group, his sword still in hand. The air around him seemed to hum with dark energy, and even from a distance, Lin Mei could feel the oppressive weight of the orb's power. Wei Long. Lin Mei's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried through the clearing. He turned slowly, his face unreadable, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion and something else, something far more dangerous. The group halted in their tracks, unsure of what to do or say. The tension in the air was palpable, and for a brief moment, no one moved. Lin Mei stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. What happened? Wei Long didn't answer at first. He glanced down at the bodies, his expression hardening. They were planning to betray us, he said finally, his voice flat. I took care of it. The others exchanged uneasy glances. The calmness in his voice was unnerving, as if killing two of his comrades had been nothing more than a necessary chore. Lin Mei could see the change in him, the way his posture had shifted, the way the orb pulsed at his side, feeding off his emotions. You didn't have to kill them, Lin Mei said carefully, her voice soft but firm. We could have handled it together. They would have killed us all, Wei Long replied, his voice cold. I couldn't risk it. Lin Mei felt a surge of frustration, but more than that, fear. She could see the darkness creeping into Wei Long, could feel the pull of the orb in every word he spoke. He had always been strong, but now he was something else, something dangerous. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. This isn't you, Wei Long. This is the orb talking. It's controlling you. Wei Long's grip on his sword tightened. I'm in control, he said, though his voice wavered slightly. No, you're not, Lin Mei said, her voice urgent. You've changed. We all see it. You can't let this thing consume you. We need you, your real self. For a moment, Wei Long hesitated. The orb's whispers grew louder, urging him to push her away, to sever the ties of trust and loyalty that bound him to the group. But there was a flicker of something else in him, something deeper, more human. He had known Lin Mei for so long, had fought beside her, trusted her with his life. But the orb's power was intoxicating. It made him feel invincible, beyond mortal concerns like friendship or loyalty. It promised him more power, more control, if only he would let go of the last remnants of his humanity. "I can't," Wei Long said finally, his voice barely audible. Lin Mei's heart broke at the words. She could see the struggle in his eyes, the war he was fighting within himself. But she couldn't reach him, not like this. "Wei Long," she said, stepping even closer, her voice soft but insistent. "We can help you. You don't have to do this alone. Let us in." The others watched in tense silence, unsure of what would happen next. Wei Long stood frozen, his eyes locked on Lin Mei's, the orb's whispers pounding in his skull. For a moment he thought he might give in, might let them help him. But then, in the blink of an eye, the orb surged with dark energy, and Wei Long felt his resolve harden. "No," he said, his voice cold and final. "I don't need help. I don't need any of you." Before Lin Mei could react, Wei Long turned and disappeared into the forest, his figure swallowed by the shadows. The group was left standing in stunned silence, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on them like a suffocating blanket. Lin Mei stood frozen, her mind reeling. She had tried to reach him, but the darkness had already taken hold. "He's gone," one of the others said quietly, the words heavy with resignation. Lin Mei clenched her fists, her jaw set in determination. "No, he's not gone. Not yet. We're going to get him back." The others looked at her with a mix of doubt and hope, but none of them questioned her resolve. "He's strong, but he's not lost," Lin Mei continued, her voice filled with conviction. "We're going to find him, and we're going to bring him back, no matter what it takes." As the group prepared to move, Lin Mei cast one last glance at the spot where Wei Long had stood. She could still feel the weight of the orb's dark energy lingering in the air, a reminder of the battle they were about to face. Not just against the Jade Serpent Sect, but against the darkness that had claimed their leader. The storm was coming, and Lin Mei knew that when it broke, it would either destroy them or forge them into something stronger. Either way, they had no choice but to face it head-on. Chapter 27, Into the Abyss. The moon hung high above the forest, casting a pale, ghostly light over the trees. Wei Long moved swiftly through the underbrush, his heart pounding, his thoughts racing. He had left them behind, left Lin Mei, left the group. But it wasn't out of fear or anger. No, this was something else, something deeper. The orb's whispers had grown louder, filling his mind with promises of power, control, and mastery. With each step, he felt its influence growing, pulling him further away from everything he had known. The further he walked, the more the weight of his past seemed to fall away, leaving only the cold certainty of what lay ahead. Power. It was all he needed now. Wei Long moved through the trees like a shadow, his senses heightened, his body thrumming with energy. The orb pulsed at his side, feeding him strength. He had always been strong, but now he felt invincible. Yet, deep inside, a small part of him resisted, the part that remembered his comrades, his friends, Lin Mei, the others, the part that still felt something beyond the hunger for power. But the orb's grip tightened. They will betray you too. You cannot trust them. You are beyond them now. Wei Long clenched his jaw, his hands tightening into fists. He couldn't let those thoughts distract him. He had made his choice. The power of the orb was his now, and with it, he would achieve things no one else could. He would rise above the limitations of mere cultivation, above the weak and the corrupt. Still, the doubt lingered, like a shadow just out of reach. The Jade Serpent Sect's main camp lay ahead, its massive walls towering over the valley below. Wei Long crouched at the edge of the cliff, surveying the scene. Hundreds of disciples moved in and out of the camp, their black robes blending into the night. He could see the central pavilion from here, a massive structure that served as the heart of the sect's operations. That was where he needed to go. That was where the true power lay. But it wasn't just the sect he was after. No, he had come for something far greater. Deep within the Jade Serpent Sect's vaults lay an ancient artifact, something that had been lost to time, something that could give him the power to fully control the orb's energy. He had learned of it through Lei Feng's conversations, piecing together the truth of its existence. Once he had it, there would be no more resistance. He would be unstoppable. Wei Long's eyes narrowed as he studied the layout of the camp. He had no intention of charging in headlong. That would be suicide. The Jade Serpent Sect's defenses were formidable, but they had weaknesses. Weaknesses he intended to exploit. Drawing on the orb's power, Wei Long cloaked himself in shadows, his form blending into the darkness. It wasn't invisibility, but it was close. He moved like a ghost, slipping between the trees and down into the valley, unnoticed by the patrols. The orb hummed with approval, its energy flowing through him like a current. Inside the camp, the atmosphere was tense. Disciples moved with purpose, their eyes scanning the surroundings as if expecting an attack at any moment. Wei Long slipped past them with ease, his movements precise and calculated. He reached the outer wall of the main pavilion and pressed his back against it, listening. Voices drifted from inside, muffled but urgent. Wei Long frowned, straining to catch the words. Preparations are complete. We must strike before they can regroup. The outsiders will be dealt with. The artifact must be protected. Wei Long's heart skipped a beat. They knew he was coming. Somehow they had anticipated his move. But it didn't matter. He was already here, and no amount of preparation would stop him now. He crept along the wall, moving toward a narrow window that overlooked the main hall. Inside, a group of high-ranking disciples stood around a large table, studying a map of the surrounding region. At the head of the table stood a tall, imposing figure dressed in ornate black robes, the sect's leader. The man radiated power, his presence filling the room with an oppressive aura. Wei Long could feel it even from this distance. This was no ordinary cultivator. The sect leader had reached heights of cultivation that rivaled the greatest masters of the realm. But even he would fall, once Wei Long had the artifact. Wei Long's gaze shifted to the far end of the room, where a large door stood, heavily reinforced with layers of protective runes. That was the entrance to the vault, the place where the artifact was kept. Focus, Wei Long told himself. You're close. Slipping into the pavilion unnoticed was easier than expected. The orb's power cloaked him in darkness, making him invisible to the guards that patrolled the halls. He moved silently through the building, his steps light and quick. Reaching the door to the vault, Wei Long paused, his hand hovering over the runes. They were complex, designed to keep intruders out, but he had prepared for this. Drawing on the orb's energy, he channeled a surge of dark power into the runes, unraveling them one by one. The door clicked open with a soft groan. Inside, the vault was vast, lined with shelves filled with ancient tomes, weapons, and treasures. But none of it mattered. Wei Long's eyes were fixed on the center of the room, where a pedestal stood, bathed in a faint, eerie glow. There, hovering just above the pedestal, was the artifact, a black crystal, its surface swirling with dark energy. Wei Long approached it slowly, his heart racing. The orb pulsed wildly at his side, its whispers now a deafening roar. Take it. It is yours. With this, you will be unstoppable. His hand reached out, trembling slightly as he grasped the crystal. The moment his fingers closed around it, a shockwave of energy coursed through him, knocking him back a step. The power. It was immense. Wei Long could feel the crystal's energy merging with the orb's, the two forces intertwining, becoming one. The darkness inside him deepened, spreading through every fiber of his being. His strength grew, his senses sharpened, and his mind expanded, filled with new knowledge, new possibilities. He had done it. With the artifact in his possession, there was nothing that could stop him now. Not the Jade Serpent Sect, not the rival factions, not even the heavens themselves. As Wei Long stepped out of the vault, the sect leader and his disciples were waiting. They had sensed the disturbance, felt the surge of power from the artifact. The sect leader's eyes narrowed as he saw the black crystal in Wei Long's hand. You've made a grave mistake, boy. Wei Long smiled, his eyes gleaming with dark energy. No, you're the one who's made a mistake. Without another word, Wei Long unleashed the full force of the orb's power, dark tendrils of energy erupting from his body and crashing into the sect leader and his disciples. The air crackled with raw power as the two forces clashed, the very ground beneath them shaking from the intensity of the battle. But Wei Long was no longer the same warrior they had known. He was something far more dangerous now. The sect leader raised his hands, summoning a wall of protective energy to shield himself from the onslaught. But it was no use. Wei Long's power tore through the barrier like it was nothing, sending the sect leader crashing to the ground. The disciples fell one by one, their defenses shattered by the overwhelming force of the orb and the artifact combined. In a matter of moments, the battle was over. Wei Long stood over the broken bodies of his enemies, his chest heaving with exertion, the power of the artifact still coursing through him. He had won, again. But as he stood there, surrounded by the carnage, a strange emptiness settled over him. The victory felt hollow, the power less satisfying than he had imagined. The orb's whispers were quiet now, but they lingered in the back of his mind, a constant reminder of the darkness he had embraced. "We are not finished yet," it whispered. Chapter 28. Fractured Paths. Wei Long stood in the aftermath of his victory, surrounded by the remnants of the Jade Serpent Sect's elite. His breathing was steady now, his gaze hard and unyielding. The battle had been swift, decisive, exactly as it should be when wielding such immense power. Yet, despite the triumph, an unease gnawed at the edge of his consciousness. The black crystal in his hand glowed faintly, its energy merging with the orb's, creating a nearly overwhelming surge of darkness within him. The two forces were in harmony, yet they demanded more from him, pushing him further down the path he had chosen. But for the first time, Wei Long hesitated. The emptiness that had settled over him was growing, a gnawing doubt that even the whispers of the orb couldn't suppress. "What is this?" he thought, gripping the crystal tighter. He had won. He was stronger than ever. So why did it feel like something was slipping away? Before he could ponder further, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Wei Long snapped out of his thoughts, turning toward the door. His enhanced senses picked up the presence of several figures approaching rapidly. The sect wasn't finished yet. Meanwhile, Lin Mei and the rest of the group were moving swiftly through the dense forest, their faces set in grim determination. Ever since Wei Long had disappeared, Lin Mei had been pushing them relentlessly, tracking his movements with a singular focus. She refused to believe that Wei Long was lost to them. No matter how dark the path he had chosen, she knew there was still a part of him that could be saved. She just had to reach him before it was too late. The group followed silently, their faces betraying their uncertainty. They had seen Wei Long's power, seen how it had changed him. But Lin Mei's resolve was unshakable, and they trusted her leadership. As they neared the Jade Serpent Sect's stronghold, Lin Mei paused, raising a hand to stop the group. Her eyes scanned the horizon, taking in the towering walls and the stillness in the air. "This is it," she whispered. "We're close." One of the others stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Do you think he's still inside?" Lin Mei didn't answer immediately. Her connection with Wei Long had always been strong, and though the darkness clouded it now, she could still feel something, an echo of his presence. He was close, but the energy surrounding him was twisted, darker than she had ever felt before. "He's there," Lin Mei said finally, "but we need to be careful. He's changed." The group exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them spoke. They all knew what that meant. Wei Long was no longer the man they had fought alongside. He was something more, something dangerous. But Lin Mei wasn't ready to give up on him. Not yet. Inside the stronghold, Wei Long was already facing the new wave of attackers. The remaining disciples of the Jade Serpent Sect had rallied, their expressions hard with determination. They knew they were no match for him, but duty and loyalty drove them forward. Wei Long didn't hesitate. With a flick of his wrist, tendrils of dark energy shot out from the orb, slamming into the disciples and sending them crashing to the ground. Their defenses crumbled under the force of his attacks, their screams echoing through the halls as they fell one by one. It was over in moments. Wei Long stood over the bodies, his chest heaving, his gaze distant. The power was intoxicating, almost overwhelming. But as the last disciple fell, the emptiness returned, sharper than before. "This isn't enough," the orb's whisper echoed in his mind. "There is more. You are destined for greater things." Wei Long nodded, though a part of him rebelled against the words. He had come this far. There was no turning back. But what was the price? The thought was fleeting, quickly drowned out by the orb's whispers. He moved toward the exit, but just as he reached the door, he froze. A familiar presence touched his senses. Faint but unmistakable. Lin Mei. For a moment, the darkness wavered, and Wei Long's heart skipped a beat. She had come for him. Part of him had expected it. but he hadn't prepared himself for the wave of emotion that followed. Anger, guilt, fear, they all surged within him, clashing violently with the cold, calculated hunger for power that had taken hold. "She's come to stop you," the orb hissed. "She will betray you. They all will." Wei Long clenched his fists, trying to push the thoughts away, but they clung to him like a vice. He could feel her getting closer, her energy bright and familiar, yet so different from his own now. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he didn't know what to do. Lin Mei and the group arrived at the outer gates of the Jade Serpent Sect. The air was thick with tension, and the lingering energy of the battle sent shivers down their spines. Lin Mei motioned for the others to stay back as she approached the entrance. Her heart pounded in her chest as she entered the stronghold, her eyes scanning the scene of destruction. Bodies of Jade Serpent disciples lay scattered across the ground, their faces frozen in terror. And then, she saw him. Wei Long stood at the far end of the hall, his back to her, his form bathed in the eerie glow of the orb. The sight of him sent a mixture of relief and fear coursing through her. He was alive, but so much had changed. "Wei Long." Lin Mei called out softly, taking a cautious step forward. He didn't respond at first. His posture was rigid, tense. The orb's dark energy pulsed around him, filling the room with a suffocating presence. "I'm here to bring you back," Lin Mei said, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't have to keep going down this path. We can fix this." Wei Long slowly turned to face her, his eyes glowing with the same dark energy that radiated from the orb. For a moment, their gazes locked, and Lin Mei saw the conflict in his eyes. The battle between the man she knew and the darkness that had consumed him. "Go back," Wei Long said, his voice cold and distant. "This is beyond you." Lin Mei shook her head, taking another step forward. "No, it's not. I'm not leaving without you." The air between them crackled with tension as Wei Long's grip on the crystal tightened. He could feel the orb's influence pushing him, urging him to drive her away, to sever the last tie that held him to his past. But he couldn't do it. Not yet. "I can't turn back," Wei Long whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's too late." Lin Mei's eyes softened, and she took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "It's never too late. You're stronger than this. You always have been." Wei Long's heart ached at her words, but the orb's whispers drowned them out, filling his mind with doubt and suspicion. His gaze hardened, and he raised the crystal, its dark energy swirling around him like a storm. "Leave, Lin Mei," he said, his voice laced with warning, "before I make you." Lin Mei's breath caught in her throat as the weight of his words settled over her. But she didn't move. She couldn't. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly, her voice firm despite the fear in her chest. "Not without you." For a long moment, neither of them moved, the tension between them thick and palpable. The orb's whispers grew louder, urging Wei Long to act, to rid himself of the last piece of his past that held him back. But even as the darkness surged within him, Wei Long hesitated. And in that hesitation, a glimmer of hope remained. Chapter 29, The Battle Within. Wei Long's grip on the black crystal tightened, his muscles tensing as the dark energy within him stirred violently. Lin Mei stood just a few paces away, her eyes locked on his, unwavering in their resolve. The air between them crackled with energy, a storm waiting to break. The whispers in his mind grew louder, more insistent. "She is holding you back. She will destroy you." Wei Long gritted his teeth, struggling against the pull of the orb's power. His vision blurred slightly, as if the darkness was seeping into every corner of his mind, blocking out reason, blocking out everything but the hunger for power. He had already come so far, crossed lines he never thought he would. How could he stop now? Yet, looking into Lin Mei's eyes, a part of him faltered. She wasn't afraid. Even though she could feel the dark power surging within him, threatening to consume everything around them, she didn't back down. Her resolve was stronger than he had anticipated, and that shook him to his core. "You don't understand," Wei Long muttered, his voice low and strained. "I need this. I need the power to survive. To win." Lin Mei's expression softened, but she didn't take another step forward. Not yet. She could sense how precarious the situation had become, how close Wei Long was to losing himself entirely. "Power isn't what defines you, Wei Long. You're more than this. You're stronger without it." Her words struck him like a blade, cutting through the fog that clouded his thoughts. For a brief moment, the orb's influence wavered, and he remembered the Wei Long he used to be. The one who fought for his friends, for his family, for something greater than himself. But the moment was fleeting. The orb's dark tendrils wrapped tighter around his mind, pulling him back into the abyss. She doesn't understand the truth. None of them do. They will abandon you. Only power remains. His heart pounded in his chest, torn between the cold logic of the orb and the warmth that Lin Mei's presence stirred in him. Every instinct told him to push her away, to force her to leave before he lost control. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to do it. "Leave, Lin Mei," Wei Long said, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "I don't want to hurt you." Lin Mei's gaze softened further. "You won't hurt me. I know you're still in there. The real Wei Long. The one who fights for what's right, not just for power." Wei Long's breath hitched. The real Wei Long? He wasn't even sure who that was anymore. The orb had changed him, shaped him into something else. Something darker, more ruthless. Could he even go back to who he was before? As his mind wrestled with the conflicting voices, the orb's power began to pulse more violently. The black crystal in his hand flared with dark light, and the ground beneath them trembled as the energy threatened to erupt. Lin Mei felt the shift in the air and instinctively braced herself. She wasn't sure how much longer she had before Wei Long lost control entirely. "I'm not going anywhere," Lin Mei said, her voice calm but resolute. "We'll face this together, like we always have." Wei Long's eyes flickered, the conflict within him intensifying. The orb demanded action, demanded that he sever this connection before it weakened him further. But Lin Mei's words held him in place, like a tether keeping him from falling completely into the darkness. "I can't," Wei Long whispered, shaking his head. "It's too late." Lin Mei's heart clenched at the despair in his voice, but she refused to give up. "It's not too late, Wei Long. I believe in you." At that moment, a surge of dark energy exploded from the orb, its power spiraling out of control. Wei Long staggered back, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light as the dark tendrils wrapped around him, feeding off his hesitation, off his fear. Lin Mei raised her hands instinctively, summoning a protective barrier of energy around herself as the force of the orb's power lashed out. The walls of the stronghold groaned under the strain, cracks forming along the stone as the energy tore through the building. "Wei Long!" Lin Mei shouted over the roar of the orb's power. "Fight it!" Wei Long's entire body shook as the orb's influence tried to overwhelm him completely. His mind was a battlefield, the whispers growing louder, urging him to embrace the darkness, to cast aside everything and everyone. But beneath the chaos, Lin Mei's voice broke through, clear and unwavering. For the first time, he realized that the power wasn't everything, that it had cost him more than he was willing to admit. I don't want this," Wei Long breathed. His voice strained as he fought against the orb's pull. His hand trembled as he raised the crystal, its dark energy swirling chaotically around him. Lin Mei's barrier flickered, barely holding up against the sheer force of the orb's power. "Then stop it. You can still make a choice." Wei Long's eyes burned as he looked at the crystal in his hand, the source of all the power he had craved and the source of his downfall. His heart pounded, and for the first time, he felt the weight of everything he had done. The lives he had taken, the lines he had crossed. It wasn't worth it. With a roar of effort, Wei Long hurled the black crystal to the ground, shattering it with a pulse of energy. The orb screamed in his mind as the crystal's power was released, dissipating into the air like a black mist. The stronghold shook violently as the dark energy evaporated, and Wei Long collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. The oppressive weight that had hung over him for so long finally lifted, leaving him feeling drained and hollow. Lin Mei rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. "You did it," she whispered, her voice filled with relief. Wei Long looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and sorrow. "I don't deserve this," he muttered. "After everything I've done." Lin Mei shook her head. "You made mistakes. We all have. But that doesn't mean you're lost." For a long moment, they sat there in the ruined hall, the silence around them thick with unspoken words. Wei Long felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him, but for the first time, he felt something else too. Hope. Maybe it wasn't too late after all. Outside, the rest of the group waited anxiously, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of Lin Mei or Wei Long. The battle had shaken the very ground beneath them, and they knew that whatever had happened inside the stronghold would change everything. Finally, the doors creaked open, and Lin Mei stepped out, supporting a weakened but conscious Wei Long. The group let out a collective breath of relief, their tense expressions softening. "Is it over?" one of them asked cautiously. Lin Mei nodded, though there was a heaviness in her eyes. "It's over. For now." Wei Long remained silent, as the group gathered around him, their expressions a mixture of relief and uncertainty. He knew there was still a long road ahead, one filled with consequences he couldn't escape. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was walking that road as himself, not as a slave to the darkness. The orb's whispers had faded, but the memory of their pull lingered. He would have to remain vigilant, for the temptations of power never truly vanished. But with Lin Mei by his side and his friends still standing with him, Wei Long knew he had a chance to make things right. It wasn't over yet. But for now, the path forward seemed just a little bit clearer. Chapter 30. The Shadow of Consequence. The sun had just begun its descent, casting long shadows over the forest, as Wei Long and his companions made their way back from the now destroyed Jade Serpent Sect stronghold. The air was thick with the weight of everything that had happened, and each step felt heavier than the last. Wei Long walked slowly, his body exhausted and his mind tangled in a whirlwind of emotions. Lin Mei walked beside him, silent but supportive. She could sense the storm of guilt and confusion brewing inside him. Though they had made it out alive and with their bonds intact, she knew the battle Wei Long had fought was far from over. The others walked a short distance ahead, their conversation hushed as they cast occasional glances back toward Wei Long. They had seen what he was capable of, the darkness that had taken hold of him. And while they trusted Lin Mei, uncertainty lingered in their eyes. Wei Long could feel their unease, and it gnawed at him. They had every right to be wary. After everything he had done, after how far he had fallen, trust was something that would need to be earned again. "I never thought it would come to this," Wei Long muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Lin Mei glanced at him, her expression soft but firm. "You're still here. That's what matters." Wei Long shook his head, his gaze fixed on the ground ahead. "But at what cost? How many lives did I take? How much did I lose chasing power?" The silence between them stretched for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Lin Mei didn't have easy answers, but she knew one thing for certain. He couldn't carry this burden alone. "Everyone makes mistakes, Wei Long," she said quietly. "You can't change what's already been done. But you can decide what you do from here. That's where your true strength lies." Her words resonated with him, but the weight of his past still pressed heavily on his shoulders. He wanted to believe it was as simple as choosing a new path, but the consequences of his actions weren't so easily undone. They continued in silence until they reached a small clearing where the group decided to set up camp for the night. The sun had almost disappeared behind the horizon, and the first stars began to twinkle in the deepening sky. As the others busied themselves gathering wood and preparing a fire, Wei Long found a quiet spot at the edge of the clearing and sat down, staring into the growing darkness. He closed his eyes, trying to still the restless thoughts that plagued him. Every time he tried to push the memories away, they surged back. Faces of the fallen, the power he had unleashed, the overwhelming hunger that had driven him to destroy. The orb's whispers had faded, but the darkness it had stirred within him still lingered, like a shadow he couldn't shake. For a while, he sat there in silence, lost in his own thoughts. But then, footsteps approached, and he opened his eyes to see one of the others, Han Qiang, standing a few feet away, holding out a bowl of soup. "You should eat," Han Qiang said simply, his expression neutral. Wei Long hesitated for a moment before accepting the bowl. "Thank you." Han Qiang nodded but didn't leave. He stood there for a moment as if weighing his words before speaking again. "You know, we've all lost something in this fight." Wei Long looked up, surprised by the statement. Han Qiang's face was hard, but his eyes held a depth of understanding that Wei Long hadn't expected. "I've seen men fall to power before," Han Qiang continued, his voice low but steady. "Some never come back, some do. But it's not about what you were, It's about what you choose to be after. Wei Long didn't respond immediately, letting the words sink in. It wasn't the forgiveness he expected, but it wasn't condemnation either. There was a truth in Han Chang's words, one that struck a chord within him. I don't know if I can come back from this, Wei Long admitted after a long pause. I don't know if I deserve to. Han Chang shrugged, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Maybe. Maybe not, but that's not for me to decide. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. With that, Han Chang turned and walked back toward the campfire, leaving Wei Long alone with his thoughts once more. As the night deepened, the fire crackled in the center of the clearing, casting warm light and long shadows around the group. Wei Long sat apart from them, though he could feel their presence like a distant comfort. He wasn't ready to rejoin them fully, not yet. But there was something reassuring in their closeness, even in silence. Lin Mei sat near the fire, her gaze occasionally drifting toward Wei Long. She didn't press him, didn't try to pull him back into the fold too quickly. She understood that this was a journey he had to take at his own pace, but her faith in him remained unwavering. Far from the camp, deep in the heart of the Jade Serpent Sect's ruins, a figure moved through the rubble. The night was quiet, save for the soft rustling of the wind through the broken stone. The figure, cloaked in shadow, knelt near the shattered remnants of the black crystal that Wei Long had destroyed. It was barely recognizable now, reduced to fragments, its once powerful energy dissipated into the ether. But to the figure's trained eye, there was still something left, something faint, a flicker of the power that had once controlled Wei Long. The figure reached out, brushing a hand over the shards. A faint hum of energy pulsed beneath the touch, barely perceptible but unmistakable. The orb's power wasn't completely gone. Interesting, the figure murmured, standing up and pocketing one of the larger shards. Without another word, the figure turned and disappeared into the night, leaving the ruins in silence once more. Back at the camp, Wei Long stirred restlessly in his sleep. His dreams were fragmented, flashes of the battles he had fought, the lives he had taken, and the power he had wielded. But beneath it all, something else lingered. A presence, faint but growing. It was the same darkness that had once consumed him, but it felt distant now, like a shadow on the horizon. Yet, even in the dream, Wei Long knew it was still there, waiting for the right moment to return. He awoke with a start, his breath coming in sharp gasps. For a moment, he didn't recognize where he was, the remnants of the dream still clinging to him. But as his eyes adjusted to the darkness of the camp, he saw the faint glow of the fire and the quiet forms of his companions sleeping nearby. Lin Mei was sitting up, watching him with concern. She hadn't slept, keeping a silent vigil as he rested. "You okay?" she asked softly. Wei Long nodded, though his heart still raced. "Yeah, just a dream." Lin Mei studied him for a moment before giving a small nod. "We'll figure it out, together." Wei Long offered her a faint smile, though the weight of the dream still hung over him. He didn't want to admit it, but he knew the darkness wasn't finished with him yet. And somewhere out in the night, it was watching. Waiting. Subscribe to Sakura Audiobooks. Give us a thumbs up and leave a comment if you enjoy our work. Your support means a lot to us.